Dr. Kimte wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stared at the strange symbols carved into the black stone wall. The morning sun on planet Cathara was already hot, and he had been working since dawn. His small team of human researchers had been on this remote world for 3 weeks, looking for mineral deposits that Earth could use. But what Tay found was much more interesting than any metal or crystal. The symbols were unlike anything he had seen before. They looked ancient, maybe thousands of years old. Q's mark was perfectly carved into the stone, as if someone had used advanced tools to make them. But what caught his attention was how familiar they seemed. He had seen similar markings in his studies back on Earth. "Commander Yoon, you need to see this," Tay called out to his expedition leader. Commander Yoon Hannah walked over, her boots crunching on the dry ground. She was a practical woman who cared more about completing their mission than looking at old rocks, but she trusted Tay's judgment. He was the smartest person on their team, even if he sometimes got excited about things that seemed unimportant. "What is it, Tay?" she asked, looking at the wall. "These symbols. I think they're part of something bigger," Tay said, pointing at the markings. "Look at this pattern here, and this one. I've seen these exact same symbols in the galactic database." Hannah squinted at the wall. To her, they just looked like random scratches. "Are you sure?" "Maybe they just look similar." Tay shook his head. "No, I'm certain. These are identical to symbols found on 17 different worlds across the galaxy. The Galactic Archaeological Council has been studying them for 3,000 years. No one has been able to figure out what they mean." The commander's expression changed. If Tay was right, this could be important. The symbols he was talking about were famous throughout the galaxy. Every major alien civilization had tried to decode them. The Centaurians had spent centuries on the problem. The Altarians had built huge computers just to analyze the patterns. Even the proud hegemony had admitted defeat. "Skutaka. Symbols," Hannah said slowly. "Exactly," Tay replied, his excitement growing. "But I think I might be seeing something that others have missed." That evening, Tay sent a detailed report to the Galactic Archaeological Council. It included hundreds of photographs of the symbols, along with his notes comparing them to the known sites. He requested funding for a proper archaeological expedition to study the ruins more carefully. The response came 3 days later. It was not what he hoped for. Velter, a senior member of the Centaurian Council, sent a brief message. "The Council has reviewed your report. While we appreciate your enthusiasm, we must remind you that humanity has only been part of the galactic community for 50 years. The architect mystery has been studied by our greatest minds for millennia. We do not believe that inexperienced human researchers can contribute meaningfully to this ancient puzzle. Your request for funding is denied." Tay read the message twice, feeling his anger rise. The aliens' words were polite, but the meaning was clear. They thought humans were too primitive to understand something so complex. They saw Earth's people as newcomers who should stay quiet and learn from their betters. "They turned us down," Tay told Hannah, showing her the message. The commander read it and frowned. "I'm sorry, Tay. I know this meant a lot to you." "It's not about me," Tay said. "It's about the discovery. What if we're missing something important because they won't listen?" Hannah understood his frustration. She had seen the same attitude from alien officials many times. Humans were often treated like children in the galactic community. Their technology was less advanced, their history was shorter, and their achievements were smaller. Most aliens were polite about it, but the message was always the same. Humans were not ready for the big questions. "Maybe they're right," Hannah said quietly. "Maybe this is too big for us." Tay looked back at the wall of symbols. He had spent days studying them, and he was more convinced than ever that he was seeing something important. The patterns were there, hidden in plain sight. He just needed time to figure them out. "No," he said firmly. I don't think they're right. I think they're wrong because they're too smart. What do you mean? Look at how they approach problems. Tay explained. The Centaurians are logical. They break everything down into small pieces and study each piece separately. Aterians are mathematical. Tiala, 4 equations and formulas. Tiamani uses brute force, trying every possible combination, and that's bad. Not bad, but limited, Tay said. Humans are different. We see patterns in chaos. We make connections that don't seem logical. We solve problems by thinking sideways instead of straight ahead. Hannah nodded slowly. She had seen Tay work before. He had a gift for seeing things that others missed, but this was different. This was a mystery that had defeated the greatest minds in the galaxy. So what do you want to do? She asked. I want to keep studying the symbols, Tay said, even without official support, even if we have to do it on our own. Equipment. We're a geological survey team, not archaeologists. We have cameras, computers, and basic tools. A tease. Not much, but it's enough to start. Hannah looked at her friend and colleague. She could see the determination in his eyes. She knew that if she said no, he would probably quit the expedition and stay on Cathara by himself. All right, she said. Finally, we'll extend our stay by 2 weeks. You can document everything you find, but after that, we have to go back to Earth. Tay smiled for the first time in days. 2 weeks is enough to get started. That night, as the alien stars shone down on the ancient ruins, Tay began his real work. He had no official backing, no advanced equipment, and no support from the galactic community. But he had something that the great alien minds lacked, a human perspective on an ancient puzzle. He didn't know it yet, but he was about to change the galaxy forever. Dr. Kim Tay had been working alone for 6 days straight. His small tent was filled with papers, photographs, and computer screens showing symbol patterns from across the galaxy. Commander Yoon brought him food twice a day, but otherwise left Kim to his work. She could see that he was on to something important. The symbols on Cathara were just the beginning. Tay had downloaded every available image of the mysterious markings found on 17 different worlds. The Galactic Archaeological Council had made this information public years ago, hoping that someone might find a clue they had missed. They never expected that someone to be human. Tay spread the photographs across his small table and began looking for connections. The alien researchers had always studied each site separately. Centaurians would focus on one planet for decades. The Altairians would build mathematical models for individual symbol groups. But Tay was doing something different. Key was looking at all the sites together, like pieces of one giant puzzle. This is interesting, he said to himself, holding up 2 photographs. The symbols were from planets that were thousands of light years apart, but they had the same curved pattern at the bottom. Park Min's young research assistant poked his head into the tent. Dr. Tay, you've been working for 12 hours straight. You should rest. Get this, Min, Tay said, ignoring the suggestion. These 2 symbol groups have identical ending patterns, but they are from different sides of the galaxy. Min looked at the photographs. He was smart, but he didn't have Taz's experience with ancient languages and symbols. Maybe it's a coincidence. I don't think so, Tay replied. Look at these other sites. Same pattern. It's like they're all connected somehow. Min sat down beside his mentor. He had joined the expedition to learn about geology, but watching Tay work was more exciting than studying rocks. What do you think it means? I'm not sure yet, Tay admitted, but I have an idea. What if these aren't separate messages? Okay. What if they're all part of one big message? Okay. The idea was simple, but revolutionary. Every alien civilization had assumed that each site contained its own complete message. Nay, had tried to decode individual symbol groups as separate documents. But what if the real message could only be understood by combining all the sites together? Tay spent the next 2 days arranging the symbols in different orders. He tried grouping them by planet, by symbol type, and by the age of the ruins. Nothing seemed to work. The patterns were there, but he couldn't see the bigger picture. On the 3rd day, he received an unexpected message. This was from Dr. Su Jin, a senior archaeologist back on Earth. She had heard about his work through unofficial channels. Tay, I have been following your research with great interest, her message said. I think you're on the right track, but you might be thinking too much. Like an alien. Remember what makes human archaeology special. We don't just look at what ancient people wrote. We look at where they wrote it. The message gave Tay a new idea. He had been focusing on the symbols themselves, but what about their locations? He pulled up a galactic map and marked the 17 known sites. At first, the planets seemed randomly scattered across space. But then he remembered something important from his training. The galaxy was always moving. Stars changed position over thousands of years. Planets followed different paths. What looked random now might have been organized in the past. Tay began calculating where each planet had been 50,000 years ago when the symbols were first carved. The work was complex, requiring him to account for galactic rotation, stellar drift, and orbital changes. His basic computer struggled with the calculations, but slowly a new pattern began to emerge. Men, come look at this. Tay called out excitedly. His assistant rushed into the tent to find Tay staring at a 3-dimensional star map. The 17 planets were no longer scattered randomly. Instead, they formed a clear pattern pointing toward a specific region of space. T whispered, "The symbols aren't just writing, they're a map." God. Men looked at the display in amazement. A map to where? K checked his calculations again. Coordinates pointed to a region near the galactic core, in an area that was now empty space. According to current star charts, there was nothing there but cosmic dust and dead matter. I need to contact someone who knows more about galactic history, Tay said. He scrolled through his communication list and found the name he was looking for: Cephalon, an elderly Altarian scholar who had shown some interest in human research. The response came quickly. Cephalon was old by Altarian standards, over 800 years old, and he had spent most of his life studying ancient civilizations. Young human, your theory is fascinating but impossible, Cephalon's message said. Coordinates you describe point to the legendary home system of the architects. Every civilization has searched for this location for millennia. Many expeditions have been sent to that region. They found nothing but empty space. Tay read the message twice. The architects were the most mysterious race in galactic history. They had supposedly lived millions of years ago and had built amazing technology before disappearing completely. Most scholars thought they were just legends. But what if the previous expeditions were looking in the wrong place? Tay replied. What if they were using current star positions instead of ancient ones? There was a long pause before Cephalon responded. That is ... an interesting point. But even if you are correct, what would be the purpose? Why would the architects leave such an elaborate puzzle? Tay stared at his star map for a long time before answering. Maybe they were waiting for someone to solve it. Someone with the right kind of mind to see the pattern. As the days passed, Tay became more convinced that he was right. The symbols were coordinates, and they pointed to a specific location in space. He needed proof, and he needed support. His small expedition didn't have the resources to mount an interstellar journey. He decided to take a risk. Despite the Galactic Archaeological Council's earlier rejection, he prepared a new report. This time, he included his coordinate calculations and his theory about the architects. He sent it not just to the council, but to every major archaeological organization in the galaxy. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Some scholars were intrigued, others were skeptical. A few were openly hostile, accusing him of wasting everyone's time with human nonsense. But buried among the negative responses was one message that changed everything. It came from an unexpected source, and it would soon put Tay's life in danger. The galaxy was about to discover that sometimes the most important discoveries come from the most unlikely places. Dr. Kimte was running. His feet pounded against the metal floor of the space station as alarms blared throughout the corridors. Behind him, he could hear the heavy footsteps of hegemony security forces getting closer. In his hands, he clutched a data pad containing the most important discovery in galactic history. 3 weeks had passed since he sent his report about the architect coordinates. The response had been swift and dangerous. Multiple alien factions wanted his research, and they were willing to kill for it. "This way, Doctor," called Captain Li Wu, waving him toward an open airlock. The human starship captain had agreed to help Tay escape, but their window was closing fast. Tay dove through the airlock just as energy blasts scorched the wall behind him. I sealed the door and rushed to the ship's bridge. "Hold on, everyone. This is going to be rough." A small human vessel pulled away from the station just as the Gemini warships arrived. They had been hunting Tay for days, ever since word of his discovery leaked to the wrong people. "Why are they so desperate to stop?" U.S. asked Captain Hiram, the military officer assigned to protect the expedition. She was young but experienced, and she didn't like running from fights. "'Cause, if I'm right, this changes everything," Tay replied, still breathing hard from their escape. The architects weren't just another ancient race. They were the foundation of galactic civilization. Every major technology we use today can be traced back to them. Lee plotted a course toward the coordinates Tay had calculated. It would take them 3 days to reach the target system, assuming they could avoid the ships that were hunting them. "Doctor, I need to ask you something," Hiram said seriously. "Are you absolutely certain about these coordinates? We're risking our lives on your theory." Tay looked at his data one more time. He had checked the calculations dozens of times. The math was solid. The 17 symbol sites formed a clear pattern when viewed from their ancient positions. But he understood her concern. They were flying toward empty space based on the word of one human scientist. "I'm certain," he said finally. "The coordinates are correct, Cal." On the second day of their journey, they received an encrypted message from Earth. It was from Dr. Su Jin Tay's mentor. "Tay, you need to know that you're not the only one heading to those coordinates," the message warned. "Our intelligence sources report that at least 4 different alien factions have launched expeditions. The Centaurians, the Altarians, the Hegemony, and someone else we can't identify. They all want to reach the location first." Tay felt his stomach drop. He had hoped they would have time to explore the site peacefully. Instead, they were heading into what could become a battle zone. "How did they get the coordinates?" Captain Hiram asked. "Someone must have leaked my report," Tay replied. Maybe they figured it out themselves once I showed them the pattern." Lee checked their sensors. "I'm picking up multiple ships converging on our destination. We're going to have company." As they approached the target system, Tay stared out at this seemingly empty space. According to his calculations, this was where the architect homeworld should be. But his eyes saw nothing except distant stars and cosmic dust. "There's nothing here," Lee said, scanning the area with his instruments. "Wait," Tay said, studying his readings more carefully. "Look at this gravitational anomaly. It's something massive here, but it's not showing up on visual scanners." Hiram frowned at her displays. "It's like there's an invisible planet, but that's impossible unless it's cloaked," Tay said quietly. "What if the architects hid their homeworld before anyone could respond?" Space around them began to shimmer. Reality seemed to bend and twist, and suddenly a massive structure appeared before them. It wasn't a planet at all. It was an artificial construct the size of a moon, covered in the same symbols that Tay had been studying. By all the stars, Lee whispered. What is that thing? The structure was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Its surface was covered with flowing patterns that seemed to move and change. Energy fields danced across its hull like living lightning. It was clearly ancient, but it looked more advanced than anything in the current galaxy. It's a library, Tay said, understanding flooding through him. Kintic built a galactic library and hid it here. Their ship's communication system suddenly activated on its own. A voice spoke to them, but it wasn't coming from any other ship. It was coming from the ancient structure itself. Welcome, inheritors, the voice said in perfect human language. We have been waiting for you. Tay's hands shook as he replied. Who are you? I am the guardian of knowledge, built by those you call the architects. I have waited 50,000 years for minds capable of understanding our message. The other species who came before you could not solve the puzzle. Their thinking was too rigid, too specialized, but you see patterns where others see chaos. You make connections where others see separation. Around them, other ships began appearing as their cloaking failed. Centaurian vessels, Altarian explorers, and massive hegemony warships all found themselves facing the impossible structure. The coordinates were not just a location, the Guardian continued. They were a test. Only those who could truly understand the symbols could find this place. Only those who thought differently could see the pattern. Crystal, the hegemony commander, opened a communication channel to all ships. This discovery belongs to the strongest. Prepare to withdraw or face the consequences. No, Tay said firmly, broadcasting to all the alien ships. This doesn't belong to any one species. Okay, the architects left this for whoever could solve their puzzle. And I solved it. T, the Guardians. Voice filled space again. The human speaks truth. The knowledge contained here was meant for the inheritors, those who proved themselves worthy through understanding, not force. Energy barriers suddenly surrounded all the alien warships, rendering their weapons useless. Only Tay's small, human vessel remained free to move. Come aboard, Dr. Kim Tay, the Guardian said. It is time for you to claim your inheritance. As T prepared to board the ancient structure, he realized that his life was about to change forever. Not just his life, but the life of every human in the galaxy. They were no longer the newcomers, the primitive species that other civilizations looked down upon. They were the inheritors of the greatest mystery in galactic history. Dr. Kim Tay stepped through the airlock of the ancient structure and immediately felt something change. The air itself seemed to hum with energy, and the walls around him pulsed with soft, warm light. Behind him, Nambo, the engineer and doctor, So Young, the linguist, followed nervously. They were the first humans to set foot inside an architect facility in 50,000 years. This is incredible, So Young whispered, staring at the symbols that covered every surface. The writing is everywhere, but it's not just carved into the walls. It's part of the structure itself. The Guardian's voice echoed through the corridors as they walked deeper into the facility. Dr. Tay, please proceed to the central chamber. Your companions may accompany you, but you are the one who must interface with our systems. Interface? How? Tay asked, but the Guardian didn't answer. They walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The walls showed moving images of distant galaxies, ancient civilizations, and technologies that looked like magic. Nambo kept stopping to examine the engineering marvels around them. Look at this, he said, pointing at a section of wall that seemed to be made of pure energy. This technology is thousands of years ahead of anything we have, maybe millions of years. The architects weren't just advanced, So Young observed. They were trying to preserve something. All of this writing, all these images, it's like they were building a record of everything they knew. They reached the central chamber, and Tay gasped. The room was enormous, with a ceiling that disappeared into darkness above. In the center stood a platform surrounded by floating screens showing star maps, mathematical equations, and biological diagrams. It was the most beautiful and complex computer system he had ever seen. Approached the interface, Dr. Tay, the Guardian, Sad.te, walked to the platform, his heart racing. As he got closer, the screens began to change, showing images of Earth, of humans, of the 17 symbol sites he had studied. "How do you know so much about us?" he asked. "We have been watching," the Guardian replied. "Not just your species, but all species. We have waited for the right minds to find us, the minds that could see what others could not." A chair rose from the platform, clearly designed for a human body. Kay sat down and immediately felt a strange tingling sensation. The screens around him began to glow brighter. "What's happening?" So Young asked, worried. "The interface is reading his brain patterns," the Guardian explained. "Dr. Tay's mind is the key to unlocking our knowledge, his way of thinking, his ability to see connections across vast distances and time periods. This is what we designed our locks to recognize." Tay felt knowledge flowing into his mind. Not just information, but understanding. He saw the true history of the galaxy, the rise and fall of countless civilizations, the mistakes that had been made over and over again. "The architects," he said. Slowly, "You weren't just another species, were you?" "We were the first," the Guardian confirmed, "the first to achieve true understanding of the universe. But we learned that knowledge without wisdom leads to destruction. We saw civilizations rise and fall, make the same mistakes repeatedly. So we decided to leave." "Leave where?" Nambo asked. "Beyond this galaxy, to explore the infinite cosmos. But before we left, we planted seeds, quills for future species, to find tests to determine if they were ready for our knowledge." The screens around Tay showed the 17 symbol sites, but now he could see their true purpose. They weren't just coordinates, they were psychological tests designed to identify species with the right kind of creative thinking. "The Centaurians are too logical," the Guardian continued. "They break problems into parts and solve each part separately. They could never see the bigger pattern. Alterians are mathematical. They look for formulas and equations. But the universe is not always logical or mathematical in the hegemony." So Young asked, "They use force and repetition. They try every possible solution until one works, but some problems cannot be solved by force." Understood now. You needed a species that could think differently, that could make creative leaps and see patterns in chaos." "Exactly. Humans evolved on a world with incredible diversity. Your brains learned to recognize patterns in complex environments. You developed intuition, creativity, and the ability to make connections that seem impossible to more specialized minds." The knowledge continued to flow into Tay's consciousness. He saw technologies that could cure any disease, energy sources that could power entire star systems, transportation methods that could cross the galaxy in minutes. But more importantly, he saw the wisdom to use these technologies properly. "Why now?" he asked. "Why not 1,000 years ago, or 1,000 years from now?" "Because now is when humanity is ready," the Guardian replied. "You have reached the stars, but you have not yet lost your creativity. You are advanced enough to understand our knowledge, but not so advanced that you have become rigid in your thinking." Outside the structure, the alien fleets waited. Through the facility's sensors, Tay could see their ships surrounding the ancient library. They were growing impatient, demanding answers. "What about them?" Tay asked, gesturing toward the screens, showing the alien vessels. "They will benefit from what you learn here," the Guardian said, "but they are not the inheritors. That role belongs to humanity. You will be the ones to carry our knowledge forward, to help guide the galaxy toward a better future." So Young had been recording everything, And now she looked up from her notes. This is going to change everything. When we return to Earth, nothing will be the same. Not just Earth, Tay said, still processing the vast knowledge flowing through his mind. The entire galaxy. All the civilizations that looked down on us, that thought we were too primitive to understand the big questions. They're going to have to accept that we found the answer they've been looking for. Nambo was studying the technology around them. Okay, can we take some of this back with us? You can take all of it, the Guardian said. The knowledge is yours now. But remember, with great knowledge comes great responsibility. Architects made mistakes too. Became so focused on learning that we forgot to live, to love, to enjoy the simple things. Don't make our errors. As the interface completed its work, Tay felt the full weight of what had happened. He was no longer just a human archaeologist. He was the keeper of the greatest treasure in galactic history. The key, the knowledge of the architects, would change everything, but it would also change him. Are you ready to return to your people? The Guardian asked. Tay looked at his companions, then at the screens showing the waiting alien fleets. Yes, it's time to show the galaxy what humans can really do. 2 years had passed since Dr. Kim Tay emerged from the architect library with the knowledge that would change the galaxy forever. Now he stood in the Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council, watching as representatives from hundreds of worlds waited for him to speak. The same aliens who had once dismissed him as a primitive human now hung on his every word. President Han Sol of Earth sat in the front row, still amazed at how quickly everything had changed. When Tay first returned with the architect knowledge, nobody had believed it was real. Then the demonstrations began. Diseases that had plagued civilizations for millennia were cured overnight. Energy technologies that seemed impossible became reality. Transportation systems that made galactic travel as simple as walking to the next room. Distinguished delegates, Tay began, his voice calm and confident. Today marks the 2nd anniversary of humanity's discovery of the architect legacy. I want to share with you what we have learned and what it means for our shared future. In the audience, Veltar the Centaurian shifted uncomfortably. He was the same official who had dismissed Tay's original request for funding. He wore the robes of a junior researcher at the newly established Tay Institute for Human-Led Research. The irony was not lost on anyone. The architects left us more than just technology, Tay continued. They left us a lesson about the importance of different ways of thinking. For too long, our galaxy has been dominated by the idea that there is only one right way to solve problems. Ambassador Choi Jun, Earth's chief diplomat, watched the alien faces in the audience. Some looked fascinated, others looked uncomfortable, but all of them were listening. The galaxy had no choice but to listen now. The medical breakthrough we shared last month came from human intuition combined with Alterian mathematics, Kay explained. The new transportation network was built using human creativity and Centaurian engineering. The energy systems that now power your worlds were designed through human pattern recognition and hegemony manufacturing. Dr. So Young, now the director of the Institute's translation department, smiled as she watched her former colleague address the galaxy. The scared linguist who had followed Tay into the architect library had become one of the most respected scholars in known space. But the most important discovery, Tay said, was not in the architect database. It was the realization that every species brings something unique to the table. Humans are good at seeing patterns and making creative connections, but we are not the only species with valuable gifts. In the back of the hall, Nambo observed the proceedings while monitoring the energy systems that powered the building. The former expedition engineer was now in charge of implementing architect technology across the galaxy. His simple human tools had been replaced by devices that seemed like magic, but he remembered where it all started. the galaxy is stronger when we work together, Tay continued. The architects understood this. That's why they designed their tests to identify not just intelligence, but wisdom. They were looking for a species that could bring others together, not to dominate them. President Han Solo felt proud as she listened. When T first returned to Earth with his incredible story, she had worried about how the discovery would change humanity. Would they become arrogant? Would they use their new knowledge to dominate other species the way they had once been dominated? Tay had been wise. Instead of keeping the architect knowledge for humans alone, he had shared it freely. The condition was simple. All species had to work together. No more dismissing ideas because they came from the wrong species. No more assuming that advanced technology meant advanced wisdom. Today, I announced the next phase of our collaboration, Tay said, and the hall fell completely silent. The architect database contains coordinates for 12 other hidden libraries scattered across the galaxy. These facilities contain knowledge, even more advanced than what we have already shared. Excited murmurs filled the hall. The technology they had received so far was already revolutionary. The idea that there was more, much more, sent waves of anticipation through the assembled delegates. But these libraries can only be opened by combined expeditions, Tay continued. Human creativity, Centaurian logic, Altarian mathematics, hegemony, determination, and wisdom from dozens of other species working together. The architects designed these locks to require true cooperation. Velta raised his hand to speak. Dr. Tay, on behalf of the Centaurian Council, I want to apologize for our initial dismissal of your work. We have learned much about the value of different perspectives. Thank you, Velta, Tay replied. But apologies are not necessary. What matters is what we do moving forward. As the assembly broke up into smaller groups to discuss the new expedition plans, Tay walked to a quiet balcony overlooking the capital city. The skyline had changed dramatically in just 2 years. Buildings now reached impossible heights using architect engineering. Transportation pods moved silently through the air. The very air itself was cleaner thanks to new energy systems. Ambassador Choi Jun joined him on the balcony. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had given up on Kathira? Tay smiled. Every day, if Commander Yoon hadn't given me those extra 2 weeks, if I had listened to the Council's rejection, I had thought like everyone else instead of like a human. The galaxy owes you a debt it can never repay, Choi said. The galaxy owes itself, Tay replied. I just helped it remember that every voice matters, even the newest ones. 5 years later, children across the galaxy learned about the day a single human. Scientists solved an ancient mystery that had baffled the greatest minds for millennia. But more importantly, they learned about the lesson hidden in that discovery, that wisdom can come from anywhere, and that the most important breakthroughs often come from thinking differently. In classrooms on hundreds of worlds, young aliens of every species studied human problem-solving methods alongside their own traditional approaches. The T Institute had branches on every major world, teaching the value of creative thinking and cross-species collaboration. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the newest voice in the room has the most important thing to say. And it would never forget the quiet human archaeologist who proved that intelligence comes in many forms, and that the key to understanding the universe is not just knowledge, but the wisdom to see it from every possible angle. Dr. Kim Tae had not just solved an ancient mystery. He had taught the galaxy to think like humans, with creativity, intuition, and the understanding that the most complex problems often have the simplest solutions. The stars themselves seemed brighter now, as if the universe itself was celebrating the fact that its greatest secrets were finally in the right hands.